Jessica had been counting down the days for 3 months. After 2 years of saving every penny and working overtime shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, she finally had the keys to her own house. Not an apartment, not a rental, but an actual house with a front yard, a back patio, and a 2-car garage that she could call completely hers. The house sat on Oakwood Drive in a neighborhood called Pine Valley Commons. It wasn't the fanciest area in town, but it was clean, quiet, and safe. The kind of place where kids rode bikes on the sidewalks and neighbors actually knew each other's names. When Jessica first saw the house during her viewing, she knew it was the one. The previous owners, an older couple named the Hendersons, had taken incredible care of it. Every room was freshly painted, the hardwood floors gleamed, and the kitchen had been updated just 2 years ago. What really sold her on the place was the front porch. It had white columns and enough space for a swing and some plants. Jessica could already picture herself sitting there on Sunday mornings with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up. After spending the last 5 years in a cramped apartment where the walls were so thin she could hear her neighbor's television, the idea of having her own space felt like winning the lottery. The paperwork had been a nightmare, of course. Mountains of documents, inspections, appraisals, and more signatures than she could count. Her real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Beth, had walked her through every step. The HOA paperwork had been particularly thick. Pine Valley Commons had a homeowners association that maintained the common areas and enforced certain rules about keeping properties looking nice. Jessica didn't mind. She wanted to live somewhere that people cared about their homes. She'd read through all the rules carefully. No cars on blocks and driveways. Lawns had to be mowed regularly. No loud music after 10 at night, and any major exterior changes needed approval. All seemed reasonable to Jessica. She'd never been the type to cause problems anyway. She just wanted a peaceful place to call home. Moving day was set for Saturday, April 15th. Jessica had requested the day off work and arranged for her 2 best friends from college, Amy and Rachel, to help her. She'd also hired a moving company called Big Bear Movers after getting 3 different quotes. They weren't the cheapest option, but their reviews were excellent. And Jessica figured it was worth spending a little extra to make sure her belongings arrived in one piece. The week before the move, Jessica had been practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. She'd already packed most of her things, labeling each box carefully with its contents and destination room. Her apartment looked like a cardboard warehouse, but she didn't care. Every taped-up box represented one step closer to her new life. She'd bought new bedding for her master bedroom, something she'd never had before. In her apartment, she'd slept in the living room on a pull-out couch. Now she'd have an actual bedroom with windows that faced the backyard. She'd also splurged on a new coffee maker and some plants for the front porch. Small things, but they felt huge to her. Friday night, Jessica barely slept. She kept checking her phone, making sure her alarm was set for 6 in the morning. The movers were scheduled to arrive at 8, and she wanted to be ready. She'd prepared snacks and drinks for everyone helping her, made a final checklist of everything that needed to be done, and even checked the weather forecast 3 times. Clear skies and 70 degrees. Perfect moving weather. When her alarm went off Saturday morning, Jessica was already awake. She'd been lying in bed for an hour, too excited to sleep. She made herself a quick breakfast, threw on her oldest jeans and a comfortable t-shirt, and loaded her car with the last few items she'd packed herself. Her apartment keys sat on the counter, ready to be handed over to the landlord later that day. By 7:30, Jessica was at her new house, using her shiny new keys for the first time. Walking through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoed in a way that made her smile. This was really happening. After years of dreaming and saving and working toward this goal, she was finally a homeowner. She did a final walkthrough, checking that all the utilities were working, and the house was ready for her belongings. The electricity was on, the water ran clear and hot, and the internet installation was scheduled for Monday morning. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Amy and Rachel arrived right at 8, carrying coffee and donuts from Jessica's favorite bakery. They'd been her friends since freshman year of college, and they'd been almost as excited about this move as Jessica was. They'd helped her apartment hunt, celebrate when her mortgage was approved, and pack boxes for the last month. "I can't believe you actually did it," Amy said, looking around the living room. "You have a fireplace, an actual fireplace. And look at this kitchen," Rachel added, running her hand along the granite countertops. You could actually cook real meals in here instead of microwaving everything. Jessica grinned. Her apartment kitchen had barely had room for a toaster and a coffee maker. This kitchen had full-size appliances, plenty of counter space, and cabinets that actually closed properly. She was already planning the first dinner party she'd host, at exactly 8 o'clock. The Big Bear Movers truck rumbled down Oakwood Drive. Jessica watched from her front window as it turned into her driveway, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was it, the official start of her new life. The moving crew was professional and friendly. The team leader, a guy named Tony, walked through the house with Jessica to understand where everything needed to go. They had her boxes loaded and were ready to start moving furniture within minutes. Jessica stood on her front porch, clipboard in hand with her moving checklist, watching as her life was carefully carried from the truck into her new home. Neighbors walked by with dogs and gave friendly waves. A woman across the street was working in her garden and smiled when their eyes met. Everything was going exactly as Jessica had hoped. The sun was shining. Her friends were laughing as they directed traffic between the truck and the house, and her new neighbors seemed welcoming. She'd done her research on the neighborhood, read the HOA documents thoroughly, and gotten all the proper permits for the moving truck. What could possibly go wrong? Jessica was directing the movers where to place her couch when she noticed her. A woman with short blonde hair and a stern expression stood on the sidewalk directly across from Jessica's house, arms crossed, watching every move the movers made. She was probably in her early 50s, wearing crisp khaki pants and a polo shirt that looked like it had been ironed that morning. In her hand, she held what appeared to be a clipboard. At first, Jessica thought maybe the woman was just curious about her new neighbor. People always seemed interested when someone new moved into the neighborhood. Jessica waved friendly and smiled, but the woman didn't wave back. Instead, she just kept staring with what looked like disapproval. 20 minutes later, the woman was still there. She'd moved closer now, standing at the edge of Jessica's driveway, and was taking notes on her clipboard. Jessica began to feel uncomfortable. What could she possibly be writing down? "Excuse me," Jessica called out as she walked over. "I'm Jessica. I just bought this house. Are you one of my neighbors?" The woman looked up from her clipboard with cold blue eyes. "I'm Patricia Wells. I'm on the HOA board and I need to see your moving permits." Jessica blinked. "My moving permits?" "Yes, your permits. You can't just have a commercial truck parked in a residential driveway without proper documentation. And you're making quite a bit of noise for a Saturday morning." Jessica glanced at her phone. It was 9:15 in the morning. "I have all my paperwork inside. Let me grab it for you." She hurried into the house, feeling flustered. Jessica had been so careful to follow all the rules. She'd submitted her moving notification to the HOA office 2 weeks ago and had received written approval. The email confirmation was saved on her phone, and she had a printed copy in her moving folder. When she returned with the paperwork, Patricia was now standing in Jessica's driveway, blocking the path between the moving truck and the front door. One of the movers stood nearby with a box, clearly waiting for her to move. "Here's my approval letter from the HOA office," Jessica said, handing over the printed email. "And here's my moving notification form with the date stamp from when I submitted it." Patricia barely glanced at the papers before handing them back. "This doesn't look official. I don't recognize this format. And frankly, I wasn't notified about any approved moving day for this address." Jessica felt her stomach tighten. "But this came directly from the HOA management office. Look, it has their letterhead and everything." "Anyone can fake a letterhead these days," Patricia said dismissively. "I'm going to need you to stop this moving operation until we can verify these documents are legitimate." "Stop?" Jessica's voice came out higher than she intended. "I can't stop. I have movers here, my lease ended yesterday, and all my stuff is on this truck." "That sounds like poor planning on your part," Patricia replied coldly. "Rules are rules." Amy, who had been carrying a lamp toward the house, stopped when she heard the conversation. "Is everything okay, Jess?" Patricia turned her attention to Amy. "Are you residents of this community?" "We're helping our friend move," Amy said, setting down the lamp. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is that moving activities need to be properly authorized, and I have serious doubts about the legitimacy of these so-called permits." Rachel joined them, carrying a box of kitchen supplies. "What's going on?" "This lady is saying we can't move Jessica's stuff into her own house," Amy explained, clearly frustrated. "Your house?" Patricia's eyebrows shot up. Young lady, home ownership is a serious responsibility. You can't just ignore community standards because you think you own the place. Jessica felt heat rising in her cheeks. She'd never been spoken to so condescendingly in her life. I do own this place. I have the deed, the mortgage papers, and I closed on this house 3 days ago. Prove it, Patricia demanded. I'm sorry, what? Show me your deed. Show me proof that you actually purchased this property. For all I know, you could be squatters trying to move stolen goods into a house that doesn't belong to you. Jessica's mouth fell open. Amy and Rachel exchanged shocked glances. Even Tony, the moving crew leader, had stopped what he was doing to listen. Ma'am, Tony interjected politely, I've been doing this for 15 years. This lady is clearly the homeowner. She has keys, she knows the layout of the house, and she's got all her paperwork in order. Patricia turned on him sharply. I didn't ask for your opinion. You're being paid to move boxes, not to verify property ownership. Lady, I've seen enough moving scams to know the difference, Tony said, his patience clearly wearing thin. This is legitimate. Don't you dare take that tone with me, Patricia snapped. I have authority in this neighborhood, and I won't be spoken to disrespectfully by some hired laborer. Jessica watched in horror as the situation escalated. Her perfect moving day was turning into a nightmare. Neighbors were starting to come out of their houses to see what the commotion was about. An elderly man was watering his plants but obviously listening to every word. A woman walking her dog had stopped and was pretending to let the dog sniff around while she watched the drama unfold. Look, Jessica said, trying to keep her voice calm. I understand you're trying to protect the neighborhood. That's great. But I really am the new owner, and I really do have permission to be here. Is there someone else I can call to verify this? You can call the police, Patricia said smugly. They can sort out whether or not you belong here. Jessica's heart sank. The police, really? For a moving day? If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't mind having them verify your story. Amy stepped closer to Jessica. This is insane. You don't have to put up with this. Actually, she does, Patricia interrupted. As a board member of the Pine Valley Commons HOA, I have the responsibility to investigate any suspicious activity in our community. And this, she gestured at the moving truck and boxes, looks very suspicious to me. What exactly looks suspicious about someone moving into a house they bought? Rachel asked. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Young women don't typically buy houses in neighborhoods like this without help from family or a husband. Where's your husband? Where are your parents? Why are you moving in alone with just a couple of friends? Jessica felt like she'd been slapped. Excuse me? It's unusual, that's all I'm saying. Most legitimate home purchases involve families, men who can handle the financial responsibilities. This whole situation raises red flags. Are you serious right now? Amy stepped forward, her voice rising. You're questioning whether a woman can buy a house by herself? I'm questioning whether this particular woman has legitimately purchased this particular house, Patricia replied icily. And frankly, your aggressive attitude isn't helping your friend's case. Tony shook his head and pulled out his phone. You know what, lady? I'm calling my office. I'm not dealing with this crazy anymore. Don't you dare call me crazy, Patricia shrieked. I am a respected member of this community. The noise level was getting out of hand. More neighbors had come outside and Jessica could see people watching from windows. This was exactly the opposite of the quiet, peaceful first day she'd imagined. Please, Jessica said desperately. Can we just figure this out calmly? I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, Patricia said, pulling out her own phone. I'm calling the police. We'll let them determine whether you belong here or not. As Patricia dialed, Jessica felt tears of frustration building behind her eyes. She'd saved for years for this moment, followed every rule, done everything by the book. How had her dream day turned into such a disaster? And this was just the beginning. Jessica stood in her own driveway, watching Patricia pace back and forth while talking loudly on her phone to the police dispatcher. Her voice carried across the entire street as she described what she called a suspicious moving operation and possible break-in in progress. Yes, I need officers here immediately, Patricia was saying. There are unknown individuals removing items from a residence and they claim to have permits, but I suspect they're fraudulent. This could be a burglary in broad daylight. Jessica felt sick to her stomach. She'd never been involved with police before, never even had a speeding ticket. The idea of squad cars showing up at her new house on moving day was mortifying. What would her new neighbors think? Amy put a protective arm around Jessica's shoulders. This is absolutely ridiculous. She can't just call the cops because she doesn't like your paperwork. Apparently she can, Jessica said quietly, watching more neighbors emerge from their houses. The elderly man with the garden hose had abandoned all pretense of watering his plants and was openly staring. A woman in yoga clothes had come out to get her mail but was taking an unusually long time to sort through it. Tony walked over to Jessica, looking frustrated. Listen, I called my dispatcher too. This happens sometimes. Usually the cops show up, see it's legitimate, and send the crazy neighbor on their way. But I gotta tell you, my guys are getting nervous. If this drags on much longer, we might have to reschedule your move. Reschedule? Jessica's voice cracked. I can't reschedule. My lease is up, my apartment is empty, and all my stuff is on your truck. I know, and I'm sorry, but my crew doesn't get paid to deal with police investigations. If this becomes a whole thing. Patricia had finished her phone call and marched back over to them. Officers are on their way. I suggest you stop moving anything else until they arrive. You can't tell us what to do, Rachel snapped. This is Jessica's property. We'll see about that, Patricia replied smugly. I've been living in this neighborhood for 12 years. I know every single person who's moved in or out. I know all the real estate agents, all the regular buyers. I've never seen any of you before, and frankly, you don't fit the profile of our typical residents. What's that supposed to mean? Amy demanded. Patricia looked them up and down with obvious disdain. Pine Valley Commons is a family neighborhood. Professional families with stable incomes and established roots in the community. Not... She waved her hand dismissively at Jessica's moving crew and friends. Whatever this is, Jessica felt a surge of anger stronger than anything she'd experienced in years. Whatever this is happens to be a registered nurse who worked 60-hour weeks and saved every penny for 2 years to buy this house. I have a college degree, excellent credit, and a legitimate mortgage from First National Bank. I don't know what profile you think I should fit, but I have every right to be here. We'll let the police determine that, Patricia said coldly. The sound of sirens could be heard in the distance, getting closer. Jessica's heart began racing. She'd always been the type of person who got nervous even when she wasn't doing anything wrong. The idea of having to prove her innocence to police officers in front of all these watching neighbors was overwhelming. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, and 4 officers got out. Jessica was relieved to see that they looked professional and calm, not like they were expecting to arrest anyone. The lead officer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, approached the group. Good morning. I'm Officer Martinez. We got a call about some kind of dispute over a moving situation? Patricia immediately rushed forward. Yes, officer. I'm Patricia Wells, HOA board member for Pine Valley Commons. These people claim to be moving into this house, but I have serious doubts about the legitimacy of their documentation. Officer Martinez looked around at the moving truck, the boxes, and Jessica holding a stack of papers. And you are? He asked Jessica. I'm Jessica Chen. I just bought this house. I closed on Wednesday, and today is my scheduled moving day. Can I see some identification and your closing documents? Of course. Jessica handed over her driver's license and the folder containing her deed, closing paperwork and HOA permits. Officer Martinez examined everything carefully while his partner, a younger female officer, took notes. After a few minutes, he looked up. These all appear to be in order. The deed is recorded with the county. The mortgage documents look legitimate, and you have proper HOA approval for today's move. That's impossible, Patricia interrupted. I wasn't notified of any approved moving day. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said patiently, you don't have to be personally notified of every approved move in the neighborhood. The HOA office handles these requests, but I'm on the board, Patricia protested. Being on the board doesn't mean you get individual notification of routine administrative approvals, the female officer explained. Property owners have the right to move their belongings into homes they've legally purchased. Patricia's face was turning red. Something still doesn't seem right about this situation. Officer Martinez turned back to Jessica. Ms. Chen, how long have you owned this property? I closed on Wednesday. Today is Saturday, so 3 days. And you have keys to the property? Jessica held up her key ring. Yes, sir. Can you unlock the front door for me? Jessica walked to her front door and easily unlocked it with her key. Officer Martinez nodded, satisfied. Ma'am, he said to Patricia, Ms. Chen has provided proof of ownership, proper identification, legitimate moving permits, and she has keys to the property. There's no indication of any criminal activity here. But what about the noise? Patricia demanded. It's disturbing the peace. Officer Martinez glanced at his watch. It's 9:45 on a Saturday morning. Moving activities during daytime hours are perfectly legal and normal. And what about the truck blocking the driveway? It's parked in her driveway on her property. Again, completely legal. Patricia was clearly grasping for anything that might stick. What about verification of the moving company? How do we know they're legitimate? Tony stepped forward and handed Officer Martinez a business card and his commercial driver's license. Big Bear Movers, sir. We're fully licensed and insured. Been in business for 8 years. The female officer had been checking something on her tablet. I pulled up their business registration. They're completely legitimate. Officer Martinez turned to Patricia with a slightly sterner expression. Ma'am, I understand you're concerned about your neighborhood, but there's absolutely nothing illegal or suspicious happening here. Ms. Chen is moving into a house she legally owns, using a legitimate moving company with proper permits during appropriate hours. This is unacceptable, Patricia huffed. I've lived here for 12 years without any problems. Now we're just going to let anyone move in without proper community oversight? Ma'am, the community doesn't get to approve or deny legal property purchases. When someone buys a house and follows the established rules, they have the right to move in. Jessica finally found her voice. Officer, I really just want to finish moving my belongings into my new home. I followed every rule, filled out every form, and gotten every permit I was supposed to get. You're absolutely free to continue your move, Ms. Chen. Sorry for the interruption. But Patricia wasn't finished. As the officers began walking back to their cars, she called out loudly enough for the entire street to hear. This neighborhood is going downhill. First we let just anyone buy houses, and now the police won't even properly investigate suspicious activity. The officers stopped and turned around. Officer Martinez walked back to Patricia with a much more serious expression. Ma'am, I need you to understand something very clearly. Ms. Chen has done absolutely nothing wrong or suspicious. Continuing to harass her or interfere with her legal moving activities could result in charges being filed against you. Patricia's mouth dropped open. Charges against me? Harassment, disturbing the peace, filing false police reports. So I'd suggest you go back to your own property and let your new neighbor move in peace. As the officers drove away, Patricia stood on the sidewalk looking stunned. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The police had confirmed she was completely in the right, but something about Patricia's expression suggested this wasn't over, and Jessica was right to be worried. After the police left, Jessica thought the drama was over. She was wrong. Patricia didn't go back to her house as the officers had suggested. Instead, she planted herself on the sidewalk at the edge of Jessica's property and began taking pictures with her phone. Not subtle pictures, but obvious, deliberate. Photos of the moving truck, the movers, Jessica's friends, and even Jessica herself. What is she doing now? Amy asked, watching Patricia hold up her phone like she was documenting evidence at a crime scene. I have no idea, Jessica replied, feeling exhausted. It wasn't even noon yet, and she already felt like she'd lived through a week's worth of stress. Tony approached them looking apologetic. Listen, we need to get this move finished. My crew is getting spooked by all this drama, and we have another job at 2 o'clock. Of course, Jessica said quickly. Let's just get everything inside as fast as possible. For the next hour, Patricia continued her sidewalk surveillance. She took notes on her clipboard, snapped photos, and at one point even seemed to be recording video. When neighbors walked by, she stopped them and spoke to them in hushed, urgent tones, gesturing toward Jessica's house. Jessica tried to ignore her and focus on directing the movers, but it was impossible to feel relaxed with someone watching and documenting your every move. By the time the moving truck pulled away, Jessica was mentally and emotionally drained. You okay? Rachel asked as they watched Patricia finally retreat to her own house. I honestly don't know, Jessica admitted. I've never dealt with anything like this before. Do you think she'll keep causing problems? Hopefully the police visit Scared her off, Amy said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. After her friends left that evening, Jessica found herself alone in her new house for the first time. Instead of the peaceful, celebratory evening she'd imagined, she felt anxious and unsettled. She kept looking out her front window, half expecting to see Patricia lurking around somewhere. Unable to relax, Jessica decided to do some research. She opened her laptop and started with a simple Google search for Pine Valley Commons HOA Patricia Wells. What she found was interesting. Patricia had been mentioned in several local newspaper articles over the years, always in connection with neighborhood disputes or HOA conflicts. There was a story from 3 years ago about Patricia leading a campaign to ban holiday decorations that she deemed excessive. Another article mentioned her filing complaints against a family who had installed a small playground in their backyard. Most recently, there was a piece about Patricia arguing at a city council meeting that the neighborhood needed stricter rules about who could purchase homes there. Jessica dug deeper, searching social media and public records. Patricia's Facebook page was a goldmine of information. Post after post complained about neighbors, changes in the community, and people who didn't meet her standards for the neighborhood. She frequently used phrases like maintaining property values and preserving community character. More troubling were the comments from other residents on various community forums. Jessica found multiple posts from people describing encounters with Patricia that sounded very similar to her own experience. A single mother who'd been questioned about whether she could really afford to live in the neighborhood. A young couple who'd been accused of having too many friends visit. An elderly man who'd been harassed for walking his dog on the wrong side of the street. The pattern was clear. Patricia targeted anyone she perceived as different or threatening to her vision of what the neighborhood should be. And based on the comments Jessica was reading, she usually got away with it because most people were too intimidated or exhausted to fight back. Jessica spent Sunday morning reading through the entire HOA handbook, which she'd only skimmed before buying the house. What she discovered was that Patricia had been overstepping her authority in multiple ways. Board members weren't supposed to unilaterally investigate residents or demand documentation without following proper procedures. They certainly weren't supposed to call police based on personal suspicions without evidence of actual wrongdoing. More importantly, Jessica learned that the HOA had specific policies about harassment and abuse of power by board members. There were procedures for filing complaints, requesting investigations, and even removing board members who violated their responsibilities. Jessica also discovered something else interesting. Patricia's term on the HOA board was up for renewal in 2 months. According to the bylaws, board members could be challenged during election periods, and residents could petition for special removal votes if there was evidence of misconduct. Monday morning, Jessica called the HOA management office and asked to speak with someone about Saturday's incident. She was transferred to Carol, the property manager who had approved Jessica's moving permits. "I remember your paperwork," Carol said when Jessica explained the situation. "Everything was completely in order. I'm sorry you had trouble with Mrs. Wells. Has this happened before?" There was a pause. "I probably shouldn't say this, but yes, Mrs. Wells has a tendency to exceed her authority. We've had other residents complain about her behavior. What can be done about it? Well, you could file a formal complaint with the board. But honestly, Mrs. Wells has friends on the board, so that doesn't always go anywhere. Your best bet might be to document everything and wait for the next election." After hanging up, Jessica realized that waiting for an election wasn't really an option. Patricia had made it clear she had a problem with Jessica specifically, and 2 months was a long time to live under constant scrutiny and harassment. Jessica decided to take a more proactive approach. She started by talking to her neighbors, not the obvious busybodies who had been watching the drama on Saturday, but the quieter residents who seemed to mind their own business. Her first stop was the elderly man who lived next door. His name was Frank, and he'd been watering his garden when Jessica walked over to introduce herself properly. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Frank said warmly. "Sorry about all the commotion on moving day. Patricia can be intense. Has she always been like that?" Frank glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Patricia moved here about 12 years ago, right after her divorce. She was normal at first, but over the years she's gotten more and more controlling, especially after she got on the HOA board. Do other neighbors feel the same way? Most people just try to stay out of her way. She has a talent for making life miserable for anyone who crosses her. But between you and me, a lot of us are pretty tired of walking on eggshells. Frank's words were encouraging, but Jessica knew she needed more than just informal support. She needed documentation, evidence, and a solid understanding of her legal options. Tuesday evening, Jessica drove to the public library and spent 3 hours researching property law, HOA regulations, and tenant rights. She learned about harassment statutes, trespassing laws, and the legal protections available to homeowners facing neighbor disputes. What really caught her attention was information about documenting harassment patterns. Every photo Patricia had taken, every confrontation, every instance of overstepping. Her authority could potentially be used as evidence if the situation escalated. Jessica also discovered that Patricia's behavior on moving day might have actually violated several laws. Falsely reporting criminal activity to police could be considered filing a false report. Interfering with legitimate business activities could be harassment. And taking photos of people on their own property without permission might even constitute stalking under certain circumstances. By the end of the week, Jessica had assembled a comprehensive file on Patricia Wells. She had copies of the police report from moving day, screenshots of Patricia's social media posts and public complaints, documentation of other residents' experiences, and a thorough understanding of both HOA procedures and relevant laws. Jessica wasn't naturally a confrontational person, but she was starting to realize that sometimes you had to stand up for yourself. Patricia had picked the wrong new neighbor to intimidate, and Jessica was about to prove it. Jessica's opportunity came sooner than expected. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after moving day, she was getting ready for work when she noticed Patricia in her backyard. Not near the property line, not on the sidewalk, but actually standing in Jessica's backyard, taking pictures of her patio furniture. Jessica grabbed her phone and started recording video through her kitchen window. Patricia was clearly on private property, documenting Jessica's belongings without permission. After capturing several minutes of footage, Jessica went outside. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my yard?" Patricia spun around, looking startled but not embarrassed. "I'm conducting an inspection of potential HOA violations." "On my private property? Without my permission?" "The HOA has the right to ensure compliance with community standards." Jessica kept her phone recording. "Do you have a warrant or written authorization from the HOA board to enter my property?" "I don't need authorization. I'm a board member." "Actually, you do need authorization. I checked the HOA bylaws. Board members can't enter private property without permission unless there's an emergency or a court order." Patricia's confident expression faltered slightly. "There are potential violations that need to be documented." "What violations?" "Your patio furniture doesn't match the approved community aesthetic." Jessica looked at her simple, neutral-colored outdoor table and chairs. "What's wrong with my patio furniture?" "It's not the right style for this neighborhood." "Where in the HOA guidelines does it specify patio furniture styles?" Patricia fumbled for an answer. It's about maintaining property values. I've read the entire HOA handbook twice. There are no restrictions on patio furniture styles as long as they're not damaged or unsightly. My furniture is brand new." "Well, I still have the authority to investigate potential issues." "Not on my private property without permission." "You don't. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "You can't tell me what to do." "Actually, I can. This is my property and you're trespassing." Patricia's face turned red. "You can't talk to me like that. I've been protecting this neighborhood for years." "By harassing residents and violating their property rights?" "I don't harass anyone. I maintain standards." Jessica stopped recording and put her phone away. She'd gotten everything she needed. "Patricia, I need you to leave my property immediately. If you come back without permission, I'll call the police." "Go ahead and call them. They'll side with a respected community member over some newcomer who doesn't understand how things work around here. We'll see about that." Patricia stormed off, but not before taking a few more pictures of Jessica's house from the property line. Jessica watched her go, then immediately called the non-emergency police number to report the trespassing incident. Officer Martinez, the same officer who had responded the previous week, arrived within an hour. Jessica showed him the video she'd recorded and explained Patricia's pattern of behavior. "She was definitely on your property without permission. He confirmed after watching the footage, and she admitted she didn't have authorization from the HOA board to be there. What are my options? Well, you could file trespassing charges. You have clear video evidence, and she admitted to being on your property for non-emergency purposes without permission. Would that actually accomplish anything? Officer Martinez considered this. It would create an official record of her behavior. And honestly, sometimes people like this need a wake-up call before their behavior escalates further. Jessica decided to file the charges. Officer Martinez took her statement and assured her that Patricia would be contacted within a few days. But Jessica wasn't finished. Armed with her video evidence and the police report, she prepared a formal complaint to the HOA board about Patricia's conduct. She included documentation of the moving day incident, the trespassing, and screenshots of other residents' complaints about Patricia's behavior that she'd found online. The HOA board meeting was held the following Tuesday evening in the community center. Jessica had never attended one before, but she'd read the bylaws and knew that residents had the right to address the board during the public comment period. When Jessica arrived, she was surprised to see about 20 other residents in attendance. Normally, according to Frank, these meetings only drew 5 or 6 people. Word had apparently gotten around about the complaint against Patricia. Patricia was sitting at the board table looking confident and composed. She barely glanced at Jessica when she walked in. When the public comment period opened, Jessica stood up and read her prepared statement. She outlined Patricia's harassment, her unauthorized entry onto private property, and her pattern of intimidating behavior toward multiple residents. "I'm not asking the board to take my word for any of this," Jessica concluded. "I have video evidence, police reports, and documentation of similar incidents involving other residents." She handed copies of everything to the board president, a soft-spoken man named David who looked increasingly uncomfortable as he reviewed the materials. When Jessica sat down, something unexpected happened. Frank stood up. "I'd like to support what Jessica just said. Patricia has been making life difficult for residents in this neighborhood for years. She threatened to have my dog taken away because she said it barked too much. It doesn't bark. She's filed false complaints about my yard, my visitors, and even my garbage cans." Then a woman Jessica didn't recognize stood up. "Patricia accused me of running an illegal business because I work from home and sometimes have clients visit. She took pictures of my house and my visitors without permission and submitted a complaint to the city. The city investigated and found no violations, but the whole experience was humiliating." One by one, other residents stood up to share their own stories about Patricia's behavior. By the time everyone was finished, a clear pattern of harassment and abuse of authority had been established. Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming she was just trying to protect property values and maintain community standards, but the evidence was overwhelming, and her explanation sounded weak and petty compared to the serious allegations being made. The board went into a brief closed session to discuss the situation. When they returned, David looked grave. "The board has reviewed the evidence presented tonight, and we find the allegations against Patricia Wells to be substantiated and serious. Effective immediately, Mrs. Wells is suspended from the board pending a full investigation." Patricia jumped to her feet. "You can't do this to me. I've dedicated years to this community. Mrs. Wells, your behavior has exposed the HOA to potential legal liability and has created a hostile environment for residents. We have no choice but to take action." The meeting ended with Patricia storming out, declaring that she would fight the decision and that everyone would regret treating her this way. 3 days later, Jessica received a call from Officer Martinez. "I wanted to let you know that Mrs. Wells has been formally charged with trespassing. She'll have to appear in court next month." How did she take the news? Not well. She's claiming this is all a conspiracy against her. But the evidence is solid, so I don't think she has much chance of beating the charges. A month later, Patricia pleaded no contest to the trespassing charges and was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay a fine. More importantly, the judge issued a restraining order requiring her to stay away from Jessica's property. The HOA board completed their investigation and found multiple violations of Patricia's duties as a board member. She was permanently removed from the board and banned from running for any HOA position in the future. To Jessica's surprise, several neighbors approached her about running for Patricia's vacant board position. "We need someone who actually understands what community leadership looks like," Frank told her. Jessica declined, but she was touched by the support. She'd found something she hadn't expected when she bought her house. A real community of neighbors who looked out for each other. Patricia ended up moving out of Pine Valley Commons 6 months later. According to neighborhood gossip, she couldn't handle being just a regular resident without special authority to control other people's lives. Jessica never found out where Patricia moved, and she didn't care. She was too busy enjoying her peaceful new life in a neighborhood where people were free to live without harassment or intimidation. Sometimes standing up for yourself meant standing up for everyone else too, and sometimes the bullies really did get what they deserved in the end. Jessica learned that owning a home meant more than just having a mortgage and a deed. It meant being part of a community and sometimes fighting to make that community better for everyone. Her dream house had turned into exactly what she'd hoped for, just not in the way she'd expected.